it is just one of those things that it is really important, and I think it's really important to actually understand the asset itself. And we all know there's lots of different wrappers and, financial products coming online that seem great. But I guess one of my probably worries is that a lot of these divert from the attention of, you need your own Bitcoin in cold storage. That's the fundamental. And I think maybe from the adrenaline rush of certain products, performances, etc., that's maybe getting lost.
Jez, how are you doing? Good to see you. It's a bit strange because I'm usually sat opposite you in the office. I
know, it's really strange. Yeah, I can see. I've got your whiteboard in my eye line. And interesting stuff we were doing with that the last week.
It has been. It's been really interesting. It's pulling the Derby conference together and outlining it yesterday.
4 weeks. Yeah, 4 weeks today.
Yeah, scary.
It'll be all right.
Perfect. Well, for everyone that doesn't know, you are part of Team Bitcoin Collective. And we wanted to just jump. We wanted to jump on the call. I wanted to have you on because we're doing so much like behind the scenes, but we don't talk about it as much as I think we probably should. So it'd be good to just, for both of us, just to also run through everything that we're doing, the things we're seeing in the UK, behind the scenes, because we do a lot of talking to people behind the scenes as well. But before we kick off, can you give a little bit of background to you, and who you are for the people that don't know you from X?
Sure. So I'm early, zooming in on mid-50s, unfortunately. Business owner, so always worked for myself, mainly in sort of running high-performing sales teams, I guess. Left university with a very average degree back in, 1990. God. But found that, I could communicate and, I used to play a lot of decent level sport and always enjoyed captaining teams, and that was sort of, as opposed to any academia, that was where I felt most comfortable. So and then the whole Bitcoin stuff was, like a lot of people, it was the second lockdown for me, where couple of my main businesses were really affected by just shutdowns and not being able to interact with people. But the sort of story of how, it's probably a bit different, is I was made aware of Bitcoin because I'm not technical, as you can testify. Share an office with me. You can testify to that. I was approached by a crypto exchange they potentially wanted to do some work in my day-to-day business. And that's how I initially it would have been the end of summer 2020, started to read up a little bit about it and thought, well, if they're going to be a client, I better understand what this is. Really probably initially started looking at all of crypto. That lasted about an hour and I thought, I just don't understand any of this. But very quickly through the odd podcast, understood the fundamentals of Bitcoin and why it mattered. And I think there were a lot of Bitcoin advocates minted in the lockdowns because of just something out of their control that essentially, almost ruined their lives. I mean, my businesses, we had to take on so much debt, and great performing businesses, no fault of our own. And suddenly we're like, well, it might be all over. And so this you looked at the money printing and obviously living where I do in London and the house prices going up and up and up. And then you start to very quickly go, well, I think Bitcoin, whilst it was certainly way more fringe back then, and that's only, 5 years ago. But the big thing was I then had this revelation that my daughter, who was then about 4.5, I realized her initials were BTC. And I thought, okay, well, yeah, there's something in
It's
there.
a sign.
Yeah, so that was it really. And then I've never studied crypto, bought any. It's just purely been about Bitcoin for me, which is where I'm, comfortable.
Yeah, and that's very different journey to me.
Yes.
I went through that crypto phase, and I think a lot of it's always interesting figuring out if people have gone through that crypto phase or they actually just found Bitcoin. But yeah, you at the start, did you think you needed that technical experience? Because I think some people still think that they do need that, and like Bitcoin is for tech bros. Did you think you needed that?
Well, one of the first things was you sort of then, reactivated an X account back then, Twitter, that I'd had probably since 2009, but never really used it. Actually used it just to follow a few sporting people I liked. And then I went through a period of a few months feeling so thick because these Bitcoin people, not just the way they were managed to talk about the global economy, but then the technical guys behind it. And I was like, gosh, I feel like really bad that whilst I'm starting to accumulate a personal position in Bitcoin, I'm just, these guys are so super bright. What on earth can I offer this community? And I think you do have a lot of that. There are a lot of people, when they start studying it, then almost want to give back a little bit. And without getting sort of overly evangelical, although I did have maybe a 6-month period in southwest London where, I was, slightly over the top. You then want to put back. And for me, it was always aligned, not so much with what we're probably going to come on to, but I saw a real opportunity in terms of getting businesses to accept payment in Bitcoin, because it was where I felt comfortable in terms of having a sales background and ultimately being able to speak to a business owner about a potential solution. And I think aside from the event, that's probably, if you remember, where we first started getting to know each other, where there was a local restaurant to me and we started running dinners every month or every couple of months with sort of speakers. And and aside from the restaurant getting some extra business on a quiet night of the week, I felt that, and maybe a lot of the Bitcoiners, even now, are like, well, actually, onboarding a merchant is sort of pointless because no one should ever spend their Bitcoin. That's a sort of a discussion that will go on and on and on no one's particularly right. It's just an opinion. But what I felt was it was a few interactions with different people who ended up, some people who I knew, so school dads, etc., but some people maybe who the restaurant owners said, hey, listen, this person's seen this Bitcoin accepted sticker. Can you come in and explain to them what it is? And I thought, just from a branding point of view of having a Bitcoin logo at a point of sale and someone being able to pay in it, almost legitimized it in the eyes of many, that it became real. So I still to this day think it's super, important. But there are, very few people who, I guess, feel comfortable onboarding merchants. Is it different? I feel comfortable in that. But then if you ask me to do something super technical with Bitcoin, I can't. So I think that's, with the guys, I guess the first guys doing it, the Bridge to Bitcoin guys who still do it tirelessly to this day. So I think that for me was the first sort of foray of integrating Bitcoin into businesses. And then it came on to my own business where it was like, well, okay, once we got through the sort of COVID hangover and paying all the debts off, etc., we were left with a really good business and arguably a better business than we went into COVID with, because I think when you're times of crisis, you sort of look at everything within that entity. And myself and my business partner, if you'd have asked us in March 2020 what sort of business, we'd have said, oh, we're incredibly lean, not wasteful, not too many operational staff. And of course, you're then forced into making big changes where actually we were a really wasteful business financially. So we made those changes, paid off our debts, and then obviously had free cash flows that, probably for a couple of years now, it's, totally price agnostic. We are just buying Bitcoin for our balance sheet. And it's amazing that, and we were talking about this yesterday, I know, just that power of buying the same sort of sterling value amount every week into this asset, that, the volatility of nature of the asset in terms of its price, sterling price, it really does sort of sneak up on you how well it performs.
Yeah, and you don't have the stress of it as well. Because yesterday, because we're designing like a presentation for businesses with Alex on the team as well. And yeah, there's this one slide in it that we were all working on, and it was like showing the power of dollar cost averaging versus just lump sum. And like, if you lump sum it and it goes down 30%, then that's emotionally draining. Like we've witnessed bear markets and watching Bitcoin just personally as well go down like 80% odd. And it's painful. So you don't really want that in your business. And actually what the results that happen from dollar cost averaging, like once we release all these graphics and stuff, it'll be really cool. Because it highlights like just the value of doing a little each day, each week, each month, however it is.
But it's and I think it's almost such a simple approach. That's the thing that maybe confuses people, because it is just a repetitive process that doesn't require any sort of specific skill. The only skill I'd recommend for a business owner is to open an e-money account, because as we know in the UK, actually sending money from a business to an exchange directly either comes with certain limits or in certain banks' cases a sort of hostility that actually, I know Robin Thatcher goes this, I actually don't think is them being completely hostile. I think there are some other rules and regulations behind UK banks that you could almost see their point of view. But that's where you have the e-money account. So you have your sort code account number with someone like Coin Corner, and you have your company account, and you just do an intercompany transfer, and then you can buy Bitcoin as much, little as you like, whenever you want. But it is such and I've had it with sort of younger people I know and saying, yeah, just buy some Bitcoin every week. And they're like, is that it? It's like, yeah, that's it. But it's not very sexy, not very exciting. It's very monotonous. And it's just like, it's like your direct debits that go out each month. You just pay your house insurance, your car insurance, in our case, pet insurance and whatever other insurance. And it's sort of just like that. But then when you actually take a step back and have been doing it for a while, you sort of look at it and go, wow, it doesn't feel a lot on a weekly basis, but suddenly the sort of cumulative nature of it over a couple of years is like, well, this is making a big difference to this business for the future.
Yeah, it's just
so,
It's what I said, it was just like, it's like just having another kind of subscription. Like, yes, as a business, you have endless amounts of different subscriptions or services that you pay for monthly, and just need to look at it like that. It's just a subscription to your balance sheet, I guess.
And if you remember, actually, I must redo the stats on this, but I not long after, probably 6 months after getting into, but actually probably a bit longer, it's probably 18 months, with my staff, and we've got quite a lot of staff, and a few of them were moaning about their company pension, just in terms of how it had returned. And there was one particular guy on a group WhatsApp, I remember, and saying, well, inflation's this, and bizarrely, he eloquently put it across, but he was one of the few guys who then never took me up on the offer. So I said, listen, I have been researching something for the last 18 months called Bitcoin, and you sort of get these moans and groans. And I said, listen, I'm going to put a couple of sessions on with a presentation I've made myself. Now, yeah, don't fall off your chair, Jory. Actually, you've seen it, and it's actually the content's so simple that
Yeah, it's really good. With the content that's in there and like the story.
graphics leave a bit to be desired.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention them, but like the story that you're telling through it, like that's the hard hitting points that.
Yeah, and I think we then had not a bad size group. I can't remember for that. I need to, but 15 or 20 people have said, you know what? Yeah, why not? We will take a percentage of our net weekly earnings. We pay our staff weekly, and we will allocate this into Bitcoin. Why not? And back then, there was a company who had, and I know the guys at Cartwright and Musket are working on a platform similar to this, but it was a company called Mode, you might remember, and they were a Bitcoin and I think a few crypto, UK based, had Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I believe they were listed on the LSE. They don't exist anymore, but they had a product, a payroll product. And it worked really well, actually, that one of our HR people, we set up the account with Mode. The individual staff put a weekly amount that they wanted to buy Bitcoin with. And then we, from the sort of our financial end, sent Mode the money. Mode bought the Bitcoin and then dispersed it back to the individual wallets of the staff. Well, some of these, I mean, there were a few who were probably trying to do it to appease me and get better commission schemes for like £5 a week. And there were some who were quite super aggressive, and there were a couple of others who said, you know what, I've got these premium bonds, and quite a lot of premium bonds. I'm just going to sell them and just lump some into Bitcoin. Back to your point about the volatility, I certainly, through the FTX sort of drawdown phase, had more messages from the people who lump sum than the people who were DCAing of what's going on. But I sort of look at it now, and I think it's roughly that they've probably been doing it 2.5 years. And again, it's not, it's not something, and these are all people, again, crikey, you think I'm not technical. These people are like really not technical. They're salespeople. And they're of a certain age, similar to me, between sort of 50 and 60 in the main. Most of them got kids, and most of them are actually doing this for their kids or grandkids. That's what they're doing, because they're like, and I think, I'll have to check, but I think they probably certainly 2x their return on paper since embarking on it. And actually, we've had some of them who sort of, we're like, look, you're not technical. And some people have different setups where some of them have gone completely, cold storage, tinfoil hat maximalists. Others are just so nervous about taking any responsibility that we're like, well, okay, maybe this is a solution for you. That a complete purist would say, well, that's not good enough. But actually, I also really worry with some of them that, they may lose access, and it's a personal choice. But yeah, I've been surprised with a couple of them because they've sort of forgotten them and said, right, I need to move my Bitcoin somewhere else. And, we get on a call. And I'm like, look, don't show me how much Bitcoin you've got. And then they obviously show you. You're like, crikey, that has sort of snuck up on you. And they're like, yeah, it has, doesn't it? So it's been great, and it's been great for morale. And yeah, it's again, that was something. So I sort of went down the route of trying to tell everyone I know, come and listen to my presentation and buy some Bitcoin. So I think you've been in the office with me where old school friends and I have spoken, and they're guys who don't know a lot about Bitcoin, but they own some. And then it was onboarding merchants. And I guess then you sort of run out of people you can speak to. And then obviously, I'm thrilled to be working with you with the time I freed up to, I guess, take things in a direction that's more formal, I guess, in the UK.
Yeah, and it's also just how do we accelerate it as fast as possible? So to have us both working on it, like pretty much full time, is so important, because like we're at that point in time that like Bitcoin is becoming mainstream. It's becoming. I'll emphasize that it's definitely not mainstream yet. But I would say so. Actually, in America, where they're way further ahead. But like we decided, right, we were gonna focus on businesses. Like they were the ones that we wanted to actually, the Bitcoin Collective, to help. And it's been quite a journey already, from like a few months almost of just doing this, and like the interest of, I think the two things that we really found were the amount of businesses that we get inquiries from that are like, we're interested in integrating like some sort of Bitcoin strategy, whether that's Bitcoin payments, whether it's Bitcoin in the balance sheet, paying salaries as well is another one that we've had from like a company based out of the UK, but they've got loads of staff in Pakistan, and Pakistan's inflation rate is over 35% annually. And it's like companies are looking at these different solutions. But then the second thing was businesses that have already got Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I think that surprised both of us as well.
If you remember we started the spaces, it was January this year. So it's 10 months ago. We did them on a Monday night and then sort of trialed it out. And then obviously I came to you and said, look, I think we need to put this through the collective. Just easier. And I think we were surprised at probably the interest level for a UK focused, and it's sort of, there was a lot of US content. And I remember listening to the odd spaces, and no disrespect to anyone, I was like, this just sort of isn't relevant. And I think something UK focused might be really good. But then if you remember off the back of that, well, I started to get like people reaching out going, oh, that was really interesting, this and whatever. And I'm so-and-so. And I remember saying to you, said, there's a really weird trend. All these people who are reaching out are people who are working in the UK and are running their own business. And I remember going, what percentage of people in the UK run their own business? And I think it was something like 14%. And then we put a poll out to our Spaces listeners, and it's never going to be completely accurate. But it then skewed that I think it was like 47% said they were either running their own business or were self-employed in some way, shape or form. And I found that really interesting. And I also think for a business to get started on sort of building their own Bitcoin treasury, it's actually, in some cases, a bit easier than doing it yourself, because you don't have to maybe, if you're going to redeploy some life savings, you've got a wife or husband to convince, or, what have you. Whereas your business, if you own it yourself, it's just free cash reserves that you are acquiring the asset with no taxable implication on taking that money yourself and personally buying Bitcoin. So I think, that has surprised us. And I think the other massive surprise that people would think is the type of business that,
massively,
you would think, oh, these are all AI companies and tech businesses. And no, not at all. Yes, there are, like our mate Jonathan at Catalyst AI, sure. But we then did that sort of a recent survey we've done, and then it covered sort of the sectors, and it's pretty much every sector. And I think that trend will continue and will gain traction because, business owners are, and I think as well, there's so much doom and gloom in the UK, but let's be brutally honest, there are lots of businesses that are doing well, that are profitable, that make profits every week, month, quarter, sitting on a cash pile. Well, and the issue with your small, mid-sized businesses is the banks don't offer you the same sort of interest that they would a corporation. So you are limited in where you can actually put your money. I think the other great thing about Bitcoin that people maybe don't talk about enough is, and we're seeing it now, is just its highly liquid nature. That for some reason, as a business owner, your first responsibility has to be to your business itself, the employees, your suppliers, your clients, whatever. And sometimes things in business go wrong and something unexpected happens. And you might need cash unexpectedly. Well, that's where Bitcoin is in a league of its own. That, we always say it on a Sunday afternoon, 24, whatever time of day, whatever day of the week of the month, you can buy Bitcoin. You can also sell it. And not that I advocate selling it and, haven't.
You can also loan against it.
Huh?
You can also loan against it.
You can also borrow against it. So I think, and that again is remarkably quick from people I know who've done it. So that's it. Whereas, you imagine now a business, and I know some businesses who have bought over the years a lot of sort of commercial property or investment property. Well, all you need to do is to go and listen to some housing commentators or look at Rightmove anywhere in the UK. And, the time it takes to sell that property, but also now with a lot of uncertainty, those values have slid. So I think just it gives you that ultimate flexibility that I don't see that other assets really do. And then we've got other stuff which we won't cover today, which we're sort of building towards, that there are other upsides within a community in the UK, I mean everywhere, of, let's just say people like doing business with like-minded people.
Exactly. It's
probably enough on that.
Yeah. But we'll be launching that at Derby, and it's something that we've been working with together on it, like building it out as a Bitcoin collective, but also building it out with all of these businesses that we've been talking about that are already holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet, or we've helped educate why you would actually do that. I wanted to bring up because it's a really important stat. It's the Alaka Bank stat that you found a while ago, and I think it's from 2023. I want to say. Yeah,
so I'd love to see a revamped one.
Same,
but the trend will probably be the same, won't it?
Yeah, and it's I just brought it up so I could get the figures right. But in this report, and it's called the Great British Savings Squeeze. So if you want to go and find it, you can just type that in with the Alaka Bank. But one of the stats that they've got in there, and it's looking at SMEs, and it says 149 billion is sitting in current accounts, earning zero interest. And that's kind of, we're seeing that a little bit as well with like businesses that are coming and saying, okay, yeah, we've got cash that's been sitting there for X amount of years. We don't know what to do with it. and you're right. Like people are different between their business finances and their personal finances massively.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think business owners, the general psyche of a business owner, if you've ever started something from scratch, you know that it's going to be a volatile journey, whatever that. So I think people, and I think as well, you have to, have a longer term sort of thought process in running a business. So I think both those two things of having maybe a longer term game plan because you're a business owner and knowing to expect the unexpected probably makes the transition to acquiring a volatile asset price-wise a bit easier than maybe someone, and again, no criticism, who, has just lived paycheck to paycheck and has done really, really well and has a safe, secure job and invest in safe things, Whereas that maybe, is harder for them to stomach. But yeah, and you almost can that my business and I are two separate entities. So there is that sort of one layer of sort of distance between it that no one likes it when the price of Bitcoin comes down. Well, Rob, you can acquire more Bitcoin so you like it, but certainly, at times it can be unnerving, but you certainly maybe feel worse with your own personal stash than your business stash. But it's, you're right. And I'm seeing a massive change, not just through the Bitcoin community, but with friends of mine and people, not just business owners, but people working in traditional finance. A huge change in how they look at Bitcoin, because if we are all being brutally honest, whenever, that FTX and massive crypto implosion took place, there were a lot of messages coming from friends of mine and people I know like, are you okay? And when you told them that you were still buying, I think, they were looking to say, well, you probably need sectioning under the Mental Health Act. Because this asset is clearly going to zero. Although not zero. Everyone who a lot of people write, well, it's definitely going to $10,000 because everyone's told me that. And I'm going to buy loads when it's at $10,000. And of course, like anything, it never got to $10,000, even though everyone thought it would.
That was one of my best mates. We had this moment at the bottom of the bear market. And it was, I think Bitcoin was at like $17,000. It was around when we had the Edinburgh conference. And he just had, because I was like, I'm buying. I'm just doing this thing. Like, this is like the bottom. And then he was like, I'm waiting for $12,000. I'm waiting for it. And he didn't buy, he ended up buying it like 25, 30 or something. And it's like, you can't, that's why going back to the dollar cost average, that's why that's so important, because you can't time the market.
No. And that's great on, accumulating on price dips. And even with the business, there are some times, more recently, when price just drops for really just some completely bizarre reason. And I've sort of changed, and whilst I try not to be online over weekends and stuff, I've got into quite a bad habit on a Sunday, and I've sort of been like, Bitcoin's just dropped 5%. So I might top up my business weekly DCA and go, you know what, this is just too cheap. And it's all about then going, okay, well, I'm bringing my, total cost base down. And it's a really interesting thing. And, but unfortunately, there is just a huge educational gap still. And I do think probably in the UK, we suffer, this whole amalgamation of crypto and Bitcoin. And I've just, I saw something else. I think Daniel Prince put it out this morning of some token that I think was quite well known has just gone to zero. And some founder of the project literally disabled his blue tick on X and mentioned something this week, and all wasn't well, and it's just gone to zero. And there's someone on there saying, I've spent 2 years working on this project, so I've lost everything. And so if you're to put yourself in, say, a regulator's shoes, stuff like that, actually, the general public do need protecting from. Because I'm sure there's a lot of crypto projects that have really good intentions, but there's obviously some that don't. And they are so centralized that almost one person or a group of people can ultimately do really what they want with that project. And, so I can understand that point of view, whereas that's where Bitcoin is very different. Now, the volatility of price will still, it's volatile in its very nature, which is a good thing. But I would like to see just this differential, which I think, and I'm not so much heard it. If you remember when the sort of present US, when they won the election, obviously it was they were funded heavily from crypto companies. But if you remember, one of the big things they sort of came out with initially, I haven't heard it so much recently, is they made that differential between Bitcoin and pretty much all of the rest of the market. I know Michael Saylor was going on that Bitcoin is a digital commodity and there's millions of digital securities. And I just feel that if you've got an asset where there are millions of tokens in this whole ecosystem, and there are going to be more and more and more and more, and, you know, tokenization of all these things, if you've got this one asset that's about 60% of the entire market cap, it probably requires at least 60% of the attention.
Yeah. And like you said on one of the town halls the other day that there's 25 million cryptocurrency tokens now.
Yeah, I found it somewhere. I think and then I looked a week later and it was 30 million. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, maybe the 25 million was wrong. And then I'm like, hold on a minute. Have another 5 million tokens been invented in the last week? Because then I went somewhere else and it said, look, you take all this information with a pinch of salt, that they're saying by sort of 12 months' time, there's going to be 100 million tokens.
It's insane. And like, it's so important. And I had this conversation with, his name's Ansel on BitcoinTreasuries.net when I went on their spaces, and just the importance of separating the two. Because at the moment, Bitcoin is getting dragged in with everything else, especially with what we're seeing in the UK anyway. It was really interesting on that conversation I had with him on the spaces, that because I was talking about debanking and like there's still a risk here in the UK for that.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, we don't really see that over here anymore. Which is really interesting just to see the difference between the two. But I do feel that element comes from being grouped in with cryptocurrency, not from the banks necessarily, but from the central bank, the regulator. We're lagging behind, and we will catch up, and we're already we're seeing that, and like the trend with businesses, I think, is like gonna be the most powerful one. To actually drive that change in the UK, because they're the ones at the moment that are the most interested in this. From what we're kind of, especially what I'm seeing.
Well, I think we all go through phases, and let's be honest. Actually, you're very good. You're personally very neutral, but we all go through it's a very tribal thing, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
The whole Bitcoin crypto, or which crypto within crypto, it's all very tribal. And now it's got even probably more so in the UK. We all love Bitcoin treasury companies, but which one do you like? And, it's, I like them all. I only like this one. And, it becomes very tribal. But I think it is confusing. And I've got a sort of theory that, I don't blame people for not understanding, because had it not been for that second lockdown and me having restructured the business in the first lockdown, which took 15 hours a day, so I wouldn't have been, that is the only probably consistent amount of time in my life I had able to study something. And it just so happened, thankfully, it was Bitcoin and not, Duolingo and Spanish, who still keep emailing every day. So, where's your streak? So I don't blame people. I think, there is that, and younger family relatives, they like the adrenaline rush of crypto, whereas a DCA into Bitcoin is boring for people who have an instant society, and it's like, well, that's not gonna make me a millionaire next week. And I think rather than getting all sort of, as I used to go, right, you should buy nothing else and it's all terrible, it's like, you know what? You actually should do whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think if you are not accumulating a position long-term in Bitcoin, then I think you're missing a very obvious trick. And that goes from anybody, an individual, through to, a business of all sizes. However, it's one of the greatest things, isn't it? That the friction of a big corporation. I remember when, was it Michael Saylor got 5 minutes to present to Microsoft or something?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I mean, and again, there'll be a lack of education. He only got 5 minutes, but the amount of people who would have to sign off and agree to Microsoft adopting a Bitcoin strategy is enormous. But that's the advantage people like you, me, and, businesses we know have, that it might be one or two decision makers who can simply open an e-money account and start that instantaneously without the rigmaroles. And dare I say it, we both know some financial companies in London and the people involved who are very pro the asset, but cannot do anything because of regulations. Whereas I can, you can. So I think we will see just this trend that it'll be the smaller owner-operated businesses. By the way, some of them that we know are accumulating, actually, they're not small. They're quite large businesses. So, yeah, I think it is just one of those things that it is really important. And I think it's really important to actually understand the asset itself. And we all know there's lots of different wrappers and, financial products coming online that seem great. But I guess one of my probably worries is that a lot of these divert from the attention of, you need your own Bitcoin in cold storage. That's the fundamental. And I think maybe from the adrenaline rush of certain products, performances, etc., that's maybe getting lost slightly, which is a shame.
I think now, I had VJ on the last episode, and yeah, he said he just threw a number out there, and it wasn't that's what you should do. But he was like, you should have at least 80% in cold storage Bitcoin, and anything else, like we were talking about the Treasury companies, but I'm sure he would also probably put any of the ETNs or ETFs or anything in that, and just the importance of that, because he went through what you actually lose when you're purchasing something that's not just pure Bitcoin. But again, they do all the ETNs, the ETFs, the treasuries, all the products that are coming out that are getting built and integrated into mainstream. They're also doing a lot of orange pilling as well. That's a big thing. So it does work both ways. Because people do come back around, but that's the important thing, is that education of learning about what is the underlying asset underneath. And I think a lot of people at the very start forget about that. And
and I think as well, certainly treasury companies or ETFs, because there is another flip side here, is this is giving capital that cannot buy cold storage Bitcoin a route and have some exposure. So that's where it's great. But yeah, I think it's, fundamentally just the understanding of the asset is
so important to know.
Important. And back to that, I know you ran the spaces this week is the age of Bitcoiners in the UK. I mean, you're really young. And I know you want to lean, but you are. And that was one of the biggest shocks for me was, and I said it to my wife this week. I said, guess what? Guess what percentage of people in the UK have answered a poll who are involved with Bitcoin are under the age of 30? And my wife said, it's got to be 85% plus. I said, wrong, it's 10%. She's like, what? Because she naturally, I bored her to tears with it, and she's very fine about it, but she's not going to go away and study it, and we don't really talk about it a huge amount. But again, she will have the default of, I'm 50 odd years of age, very bright, not very technical. Well, this digital stuff won't be for me. It'll be for, but how wrong, because we all know from just our sort of interactions, people we know, that it's a different audience. And then Danny, I know at Coin Corner, then put their report out that showed actually the younger generation have more of an interest in the wider crypto market, which is probably understandable with, everything being instant and available to them.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing the demographics, and I see that, and like I see the reports, and then I see your poll, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of fits with what I see in the space. Right, for the last 5 minutes, let's chat Derby, because we managed to pull quite the speakers coming, but also the audience coming as well. And
I've just got to start. I spoke to a few people this week, and actually they don't realise how close and accessible Derby is. So I had it with someone, they go, oh, Derby, that's miles away. I'm like, it's not. It's like an hour and 20 minutes from St Pancras. And they're like, is it? I said, yeah. We've done it many times. So, we're very excited about it. I guess we've got some great people coming and great speakers. I think it's a sort of double-edged. It's not a conference because actually we've gone quite light on the amount of talking, and it's all about the networking and a bit of food and a drink and a chat. And it's great. We've done really well with tickets because actually we don't have that many left, and maybe we can tot it all up because it's it's not a huge venue. It's a beautiful venue, but it's not huge. And we know the right number that we want to come. And I think what else is really interesting is it's funny looking back at your Edinburgh conference where the majority of the speakers at their own expense flew in from overseas. And that was how many years ago now? Was it 3 or 4?
3 years.
Yeah. Whereas now, I'm just looking at the whiteboard, pretty much bar...
I think we've got one international.
One from Europe. It's all UK-based people.
Yeah.
That's a massive change in 3 years.
It's huge, because I do remember looking at, like, the UK back in, like, 2022 and, like, the landscape. And, of course, there's some amazing Bitcoiners and like Bitcoin communities, but like it wasn't the level of what we've got now. Like the majority, I want to say in Edinburgh, maybe 80% were international. That came, and now we can curate a room of. I think it's also important because we're talking so much about businesses in the UK during this conference, and like also just like individuals taking action and like doing something, and that's all very UK focused. So it's nice to be able to hear from UK people who are actually doing stuff, because it's quite cool. We've got a lot of people in the room that are curious about integrating Bitcoin into their business and lives, let's say. People are already doing it, but then there's charities coming, and there's like politicians coming, and there's such a range of people, and it's not saying it's been easy to curate that room because we have both been grinding to get the right people in that room, but yeah, the one thing that I always say with conferences that whenever we put them on is that I don't really want them to be necessarily a celebration of Bitcoin, although there is an element of that. I want it to be, right, what can we do to actually take action and get shit done, essentially.
And I mean, the calls I was having with a sort of local business community of great businesses in Derby yesterday, and I think we both were aligned that if we're doing this in Derby, it would be great to have some representation from Derby. And that looks really positive. And I think it's, again, it's not, and that's the balance we got with the conference is, I think we're both strong believers that 50% of that room will know pretty much nothing. And the other 50% will be different levels of knowledge. But I think, again, it's almost the word consider. It's, a day to just go, how could this benefit my business or my particular company, my family, whatever? Not, oh, you must buy Bitcoin and it's this, that, the other. It's just, there are lots of ways you could integrate it. And I know some of the people coming, like super successful people who I think just with the tone of the conference and the sort of welcoming nature and the networking bit, because you do, I see it where certain conferences, probably more so in other parts of the world, they're a little bit over the top and probably off-putting to someone who's like, well, crikey, this is just a bit too much. And then we've obviously, the week before or 10 days before, we are probably going to the Lion's Den, aren't we? We are exhibiting at the largest UK small mid-sized business show in London. And we got a stand, there's a little talk we're doing one day, and I think that is going to be really interesting of just a gauge of the average UK business owner attending this event where the banks will be there and accounting software. And it's a big, big event. I know you got the number. Is it like 80,000? CEOs, CFOs?
Well, I wish it was
30,000.
Yeah. And yeah, but like 500 exhibitors as well.
But I'm just going to be really interested as to how many people approach us, and there will be some, or how many people are like, wow, this is a mad stand. What is this doing here?
We'll be very out of place, but I think that's a good thing. And
yeah, I do as well. But that's going to be a really interesting acid test for me of where are we in the UK? And, as we said, the US, it's almost not a done deal, but it's becoming accepted and integrated. Whereas here, we're just not at that level yet, which is, slightly disappointing when I think we could have been really nimble as a country. And we haven't been, but, hey ho.
Yeah, we're doing our bit to try and push it forward. And I do believe that businesses are the way to do that.
Yeah.
By getting them together to drive collectively as one. Which, at Derby, that'll become more obvious how we're going to be doing that.
Yes.
Or after Derby as well. So
yeah,
everyone, keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been awesome. It's been good having you on and actually just recording what we chat about most days. Yes.
Yeah. We can't record everything we chat about. Well, certainly on my side, but yeah, it's it's great, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's just it's just so exciting, and I think that's one of the things is there is a lot of blooming doom and gloom out there at the moment. And this is just whilst it can be people who like Bitcoin tend to have quite vocal opinions in the main, and so there are. Whilst we all agree on Bitcoin, we disagree on a lot, not yourself and I, but other people disagree in a lot of stuff. And there's some very direct individuals, which actually is a good thing. But yeah, I just think overall, it's just in terms of just a positivity of being involved with something. It's still its early days. And just, I guess, yourself and to a lesser extent me, just the discussions you have with people. But it's really interesting. And actually, I don't sense much doom and gloom from people who are learning about and understanding Bitcoin. I'm seeing completely the opposite. I'm seeing maybe some frustration with the speed of integration and certain rule makers, but nothing but sort of positivity and a real sort of can-do attitude, which is important.
Yeah, it's very hopeful and optimistic about the future, and like that's the kind of people I want to be around, and like that's what Bitcoiners are. That's what Bitcoin businesses are as well. Like building for that future, and it's a good space to be in. Amongst all the doom and gloom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for hopping on, and I'll see you in the office very soon.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye.